Well, you've heard the words diversity, equity, and inclusion over and over and over. DEI, you hear it from the White House. You hear it from your corporation. You hear it from the media. And this standard, diversity, equity, and inclusion, according to Joe Biden's White House, has been infused in every aspect of American government. Now, what exactly does any of that mean? We've talked about it at length on the show before. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is essentially critical race theory boiled down to a friendlier piece of corporate boilerplate. Essentially, what it argues is that if you have a situation in which one demographic group is underrepresented in any particular industry or job, that must be the result of some sort of systemic discrimination or racism. So, for example, if you don't have enough, say, black surgeons, that is because the surgical system itself discriminates against black people, because in the sort of vision of Ibram X. Kendi, either everyone is equal in every possible way, which means that therefore everyone should be equally represented in every industry, or everyone is unequal, which means that you are a racist. Now, there is a sort of halfway point between those two positions, which happens to be the truth, that people of all races and all individuality differ in their genetics. They differ in their environments. They differ in their culture, that all individuals are different. And that means that when you take a look at group averages, there are very few examples actually across all of humanity in which group averages are completely identical. But we have to ignore that in favor of this DEI proposition. Why? Because DEI is a gun pointed directly at the heart of the meritocracy. The meritocracy suggests that there should be objective metrics by which we succeed or fail. And the good news about meritocracy is that it means that if you succeed, it's because you are doing something better than someone else, which means that's better for everyone else. The DEI idea innately means that people who are unqualified are going to advance in life by dint of the fact that they are considered a part of a victimized group. Now, why does this matter? It matters in pretty much every industry. It matters at universities, where you've seen, for example, Asian Americans discriminated against because they are too high achieving in favor of people from other groups who have lower test scores. You've seen it in the government, where you see people completely unqualified for particular offices appointed to those offices so as to establish some form of social justice. And now we see it in medicine. So, one of our producers, excellent researcher and producer Greg Ray, he helped us put this together. And it's an amazing, amazing story. DEI is not just present when it comes to your corporate hiring practices. It is also present in medicine. And that should frighten the living hell out of everyone, because all you care about when you go into the doctor is my doctor good at the medicining? Is my doctor good at taking care of me and making sure that I am healthy? I mean, this is an area where meritocracy should be the only thing that counts. Is my doctor likely to fix me, or is my doctor bad at that job and got appointed because of extraneous merits? And it wouldn't matter what those extraneous merits are, whether they're intersectional or whether it's nepotism. That doesn't matter. All you care about when you get into that surgical bed is that the person operating on you should be good at that job. But surgery is now being impacted by DEI. Apparently, sources at Wake Forest Medical School are about to graduate Kaishel Del Rosario. She's a med student who injured a conservative patient and then bragged about it. Here's what she tweeted. This is back in March of 2022. Quote, I had a patient I was doing a blood draw on see my pronoun pin and laugh loudly to the staff. She, her? Well, of course it is. What other pronouns are there? It? I missed his vein, so he had to get stuck twice. Snorting laughing emoji. Now, that of course is an insane tweet. The idea being that if somebody disagrees with you politically, then you make them actually suffer because you are in the position of the doctor. Now, as our sources tell us, Wake Forest allowed Rosario to lay low and take a voluntary leave of absence when this scandal originally broke. And she was not actually expelled or suspended. And in fact, no apology was issued. Wake Forest went into full denial mode over all of this. Also, UPenn Health has hired Ewan Liu, who is Del Rosario's classmate, who also tweeted that it seemed, quote, karmatic when she injured the patient who mocked her pronoun pin. Wake Forest then showered Liu with awards for excellence in patient care. She now focuses on LGBTQ plus health. Here's what she tweeted at the time, quote, heard this story firsthand weeks ago, and it seems like people are misinterpreting, understandably from the phrasing. To clarify, the misstick was completely an accident and just seemed, quote unquote, karmatic. She is kind and professional and would never harm anyone intentionally. So first of all, the basic idea that medical error is rooted in karma, that you quote unquote deserve it if there is a medical error upon you because you have the wrong belief system, like say you believe in the actual scientific fact that there are men and there are women. That is a serious, serious problem. Also, according to our sources, both UPenn and Lewis Medical School, Wake Forest, they've attempted to hide Lewis hiring. Wake Forest didn't actually list Lewis Hospital in graduation materials. Penn does not list Lewis Medical School on its website. Now, again, all of this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? This is one basic situation which no apology was issued for a bad tweet. You could theoretically imagine a situation in which these students, they said something dumb, but now they apologize for it because they realized that it was wrong to say it. But that's not actually what happened. And the bigger problem, of course, is that this sort of perspective, which is that left-wing social views or intersectional qualities make you a better doctor, this has become a widespread perspective in the field of surgery. So let's talk about an award-winning Duke surgical resident named Vignesh Raman. At an internal DEI lecture, Raman actually said that his heart sinks when he has patients who watch Fox News or wear MAGA hats. Here's what he had to say.
The thing is, we are in the South, right? And unlike a lot of the hospitals in the Northeast or in the West, we serve a very Southern population. This is not a VIP hospital. People are not flying in from Qatar to get treated here. We treat patients who are just from the community in the South. And yes, my heart sinks every time I go into a room and I watch them watching Fox News, or they have a MAGA hat on, or they're wearing a Confederate belt, right? These are the patients that we treat. But Geraldine, I will say that the one very good thing about the South that I enjoy is exactly what I alluded to earlier, is that we don't treat VIPs. We treat people from our community. And our community, as Auri explained, is majority non-white. And it is wonderful to treat such a diverse group of people in every regard. And that's not an experience that I had in my sabais in other places, or that my friends have training in other programs.
First of all, diverse meaning non-white is an amazingly euphemistic statement. Diverse usually means, a broad diversity of people. But now, of course, diversity means not white people. So first of all, when you have surgical residents who have won awards talking about their hearts sinking when they see somebody of a different political perspective, that should put up your radar a little bit. But that's not the bad part. The bad part is what Raman says next. So according to Raman, he says that post-George Floyd, Duke actually made a concerted effort to stop hiring so many quote-unquote walls of white men, and that the team even learned to abandon particular metrics and adopt holistic application practices so as to recruit more women and more Latinx surgeons. Here's Vignesh Raman.
2020 and George Floyd and those events happened and sort of collectively galvanized the consciousness of Duke University and certainly our department to try to do something, and recognizing this centuries-long history of racism and slavery in which Duke University essentially was founded, on which it was founded. And that's when we sort of had to confront the history of the institution, the history of our department, the walls of white men that are draped across our hallways. And that's when we started to think that maybe something should change. Something should change within ourselves in who comprises this department, in terms of the faculty, in terms of the residents, significant inequity in representation in our program. And it's something that we've been consciously, deliberately working hard to change over the last several years. Some of the things that we have done, in addition to what Lillian presented, I think the most important thing we've done is really systemic changes to our recruitment process to try to recruit diverse residents to our program, and then to retain and support those diverse residents after they get to our program. So part of this has involved transitioning to a completely holistic review process that we spoke about earlier today, abandoning all sort of metrics and screens, looking at people's life story and what brought them into surgery. And then the other part of it is increasing the diversity of the people who read the applications, right? Because that's an important component of ensuring that we get diverse residents into our program. And then once residents get here, how do we support them?
So just to get that straight, he's literally saying that we are ignoring metrics in order to look at the life story of your surgeon. Now, I just have a question for you. You go in for an open heart surgery because God forbid you got a blockage in your artery. Do you ask for the surgeon's life story? Do you care about the surgeon's life story? Should you care? about the surgeon's life story, or do you care a lot more about whether this doctor has a good track record of making sure that people who require a bypass actually get the bypass they need without dying on the table? It is insane for surgical residencies to take a look at people based on their life story as opposed to objective metrics of success. It's totally crazy. It's totally, by the way, this same person has also tweeted that he won't, quote unquote, amplify medical literature involving only white men. He tweeted out, this is July of 2020, quote, I would say even for academic publications, I don't want to amplify the work of white men who only collaborate with other white men. Well, there go most of the modern medical advances in human history. Like, seriously? You're not going to actually take a look at the academic publications of white men working with other white men? Okay, first of all, that's racism. Second of all, these are the areas where merit matters most. And of course, again, even this guy is only one example of a bigger trend. This guy is the tip of the iceberg. The American College of Surgeons, the ACS, gave its 88,000 members, for example, a definition of racism that says it is literally impossible to be racist against white people. Here's what they said, quote, racism is the marginalization and or oppression of people of color based on a socially constructed racial hierarchy that privileges white people. Racism involves one group having the power to carry out systematic discrimination through the institutional policies and practices of the society, and by shaping the cultural beliefs and values that support those racist policies and practices. That is the Ibram X. Kendi definition of racism. Racism is not just discrimination against a race. It is power plus discrimination against the race. And the only people we can ever deem to be powerful are white men, which means that being racist against white people is totally fine. Not only is it fine, it is a corrective mechanism. So barring, for example, white men from getting into top-level surgical residencies as a corrective mechanism is somehow good now. And you put that pressure all the way down the system, and what you're ending up with is fewer qualified people who are entering the system and more unqualified people going to top medical schools. That same American College of Surgeons invited a person named Madeleine Torres to explain to its members that when patients see physicians who look like them, they tend to do better, and suggested that grants and awards be distributed to surgeons on the basis of their intersectionality.
Where we're seeing evidence that diversity leads to improved outcomes with our patients. We know that a lot of data that when patients see physicians that look like them, they tend to do better. They tend to have better compliance, their outcomes are better. And medicine has really lagged behind in a sense of representing the population that we served. So, for example, the Association of Women Surgeons has partnered with the Latino Surgical Society and created liaison positions so that we have a word or say at the table in terms of what's important for our membership. Association for Academic Surgery does that. SAGES does that. SAT is doing that. The other thing that they're focused on, which I think is phenomenal, is they have developed grants and awards specifically for underrepresented minorities.
Again, these sorts of happy-talking, nonsensical phraseologies, all of this stuff is one thing in the synergistic corporate boardroom. It is another thing when you are talking about the surgical room. There's a recent conference on DEI at Penn, where you and Lou now works. One surgeon explained that it was off-putting that so many surgeons were quote-unquote white men.
You know, I think surgery in general has been, a predominantly white and male dominated field, and that can be very off-putting and intimidating for somebody. And unfortunately, I think we've probably lost, many brilliant minds just for that reason. They don't feel like they belong. They feel like they're an other. And I think even once you're here, you can very easily feel like an other just because you don't look like or share a lot of the same experiences as your peers.
Okay, you know what makes somebody feel like an other? If you literally say that they are an oppressor class and therefore should not be part of your surgical residency. These same doctors go on to explain that surgery requires something like the NFL's Rooney Rule. So the Rooney Rule is a rule in the NFL that you must interview a certain number of black applicants to a position before you're actually allowed to hire. So they're saying that teams should be forced to interview minority candidates regardless of qualifications.
I published years ago that the Rooney Rule, the rule that they use in the NFL, should be applied to academic medicine and academic surgery in particular. If you thought some of the comments most recently about DEI efforts are challenging and inflammatory now, you can imagine a decade ago. That being said, it still needed to be discussed. So I think the lens of who else is out there, let's reach a little further, not down, but out, pertaining to candidates that we need to consider, is probably the way that it needs to go, Sanford, in my opinion.
I think there also needs to be some accountability or some, credence put on diversity initiatives, put on the diversity work that you may or may not be doing, or the diversity of your department, or the diversity of something. Because certainly if you've published 75 manuscripts in an abbreviated amount of time, absolutely. But the Rooney Rule, which we know doesn't work very well since there's not that many Black, head coaches, is also that they just have to interview them. They don't have to hire them, and they don't have to actually think about them, on the same level. They have to interview them. And so I think that we're still in the same issue, that if the white man or the white male chair is picking their successor or picking whoever it is, they're still going to gravitate towards the white male, whatever. And so the Rooney Rule, I think, is great, but it needs to go one step further. And I'm sure that that's not going to be incredibly popular out in the world, but it's true, because we know that just interviewing them isn't enough, because they're still not getting picked.
So people must be forced to select Black candidates or minority candidates or whomever, forced to pick that. I love the fact that we are now living in this Orwellian world where she can assume that if a white chair of a medical association picks, say, an Asian person to replace them, that is in fact white supremacy done through unconscious bias. But if they openly pick somebody for race, then that is somehow a corrective. In other words, you have to assume that the entire system is evil in order for you to perpetuate your own evil, which is to select people not on the basis of merit. And she literally says that it's one thing if you have 75 publications or whatever, but what about people who don't have 75? What about the people who are just incompetent? Why shouldn't they have a shot at being chief medical resident at Harvard? Why not? What exactly is the problem? Well, I mean, listen, here's the problem. The problem is that the third leading cause of death in the United States is medical error. That is the third leading cause of death. There are enough mistakes that get made in the operating room or in doctors' offices all around the country already. The last thing that you need is to specifically go out of your way to put unqualified people in positions of power based on their race. And whenever people say this sort of stuff, there's an accusation that what you're saying is racist. No, what I am saying is the opposite of racist. I am saying merit should decide. Merit should decide. The people who are advocating for DEI in these professions, they are the racists. They're explicitly saying that race is the only relevant factor that should be able to overcome merit. Again, this is dangerous stuff because people die all the time in hospitals. People die all the time from medical malpractice, from medical error. And going out of your way as a medical school or as a college of surgeons to suggest that DEI ought to be a governing principle, there ought to be only one governing principle and one governing principle alone. And that governing principle ought to be the merit of the doctor. That's it. There is no other governing principle. As a patient, that is what I care about when I put my kids in the care of a doctor or a surgeon, God forbid. The only thing I care about is whether that person is going to be able to take care of me or my kid. I do not care at all about the race of the person. And the fact that colorblindness is now seen as racism, and that the corrective to that is actual racism, is totally insane. And it's going to get people killed. It legitimately will get people killed. You have incompetent people in positions of power, specifically because of DEI. And that particular philosophy is not, of course, relegated to the practice of medicine. It's a horrifying story over the weekend. According to CNN, there has been a suspect in the killing of an Augusta University College of Nursing student at the University of Georgia campus in Athens. The young woman's name was Laken Hope Riley, who was a junior on the dean's list at Augusta University. According to the University of Georgia Police Chief Jeff Clark, it was a crime of opportunity by an individual who woke up with bad intentions. So who exactly is the alleged murderer? Well, the police are recommending charges against a 26-year-old, including felony murder, false imprisonment, kidnapping, and concealing the death of another in Riley's killing. Who exactly was the suspect? Well, it turns out that the suspect was, wait for it, an illegal immigrant. This person is undocumented. Apparently, according to a member of the Georgia legislature, the suspect was in the country illegally, having crossed the border in El Paso, Texas in 2022. He was apprehended at the border and released into the United States. Now, again, that is the catch and release program the Biden administration has put in place. This is all about DEI. Remember, diverse people get to break the law. That's the way that this works. The suspect was arrested in Queens, New York for an injury to a child and having no license. That was in September of 2023. But again, New York City also has a DEI policy whereby they've decided that crime, an objective metric, is no longer sufficient to decide whether someone ought to go to jail or be deported. If too many Black or Hispanic people are being arrested and or deported, well, that must mean that the system is broken and we have to get rid of the metric itself. The suspect and his brother were cited in Athens, Clark County, in October of 2023 for shoplifting. The suspect even had an outstanding bench warrant as of December 2023 for failing to appear in court on the shoplifting charges. The suspect's brother was charged yesterday by federal authorities for possessing a fraudulent green card. The suspect's brother was arrested in Athens, Clark County in September 2023 for a DUI, driving without a license, speeding, open container, and failure to yield to an emergency vehicle, and was arrested again in December.